Good afternoon and welcome to Webinar Wednesday. We're excited to have over 270 registered attendees for today's webinar, which is eligible for 1 credit from the ACI. Let's get started by giving one lucky attendee a Webinar Wednesday t-shirt for answering this trivia question. Today's sponsor, CyberMDX, is headquartered in New York. The Statue of Liberty was a gift from which European country? Answer now using the questions feature on your dashboard. While you're answering, I want to remind everyone that our Spring MD Expo takes place at the Hotel Irvine, California from April the 20th to 22nd. It will bring HTM professionals from across the nation for 3 days of learning, networking, and the latest advances in medical technology, products, and services. Registration is open and register for free using the code GOIRVINE. That's GOIRVINE. More details can be found at mdexposhow.com. Okay, let's see who the winner of our Webinar Wednesday t-shirt is, and it is Scott Davis. Congratulations, Scott. Of course, the correct answer is France. Webinar Wednesday would like to thank our sponsor, CyberMDX. CyberMDX is a pioneer in medical cybersecurity with an IOMT solution that delivers visibility and threat prevention for medical devices and clinical assets. With CyberMDX, hospitals identify, assess, detect, and prevent potential cyber attacks with continuous discovery of medical devices, comprehensive risk assessment, and owl-based containment and response. For more information, visit cybermdx.com. Okay, and our presenters today are Ido Geffen, VP Product Management at CyberMDX, and Derek Board, Security Analyst at CommonSpirit Health. Ido, you may begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Linda. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this webinar. My name is Ido Geffen, and I'm the VP of Product at CyberMDX. A little bit about myself. My interest in medical devices go back more than 50 years back, from my service as a paramedic to a special combat engineering unit at the Israeli Defense Forces. I've experienced in my hands how a proper operation of medical devices helps us to save lives. Over the past 12 years, I have gained extensive cyber experience from a variety of positions at the Israeli Security Agency and 3 years as a VP of Product at CyberMDX. I'm more than honored to co-host this fascinating webinar with Derek Board from CommonSpirit Health. I really hope you will find the knowledge and the experience that we will share with you today as something that is effective and interesting for you. Derek?
A few words about myself. My name is Derek Board. I'm absolutely obsessed with medical devices my whole life since I've been 18 years old, which I work for a partner with Captain Health Initiative, the merged partner. I also have been a biomed for more than 35 years, and after 35 years of working on biomedical devices, I wanted to expand more, give more of myself to medical devices, so I went to school to get a bachelor's degree in IT so I could focus on the security of medical devices, which I felt is the emerging field of medical devices. There's no blanket to cover the medical devices. It seemed to be an ignore aspect of medical devices, so I wanted to get on the ground floor and learn how I could protect medical devices.
Thank you, Derek. So today in our agenda, we will cover 4 topics about major challenges and opportunities for Biomed and HTMs. We will share our best practices on how to managing hyper-connected environments. And in the end, we will look a little bit on the future and also to discuss how we can prepare ourselves to the challenges that we are going to face in the coming years. Derek, can you please share with me a little bit from your perspective how the job of HTMs and Biomed has evolved in the last few years?
The reason I think involved because the data systems were so well protected that nefarious actors are starting to go after the medical devices. In CommonSpirit Health, they had a focus on how to protect medical devices, and they began to build a security program that will allow our IT staff and CE staff to work in collaboration to assure that the medical devices are safe as they could possibly be and not disrupt patient care while keeping the clinical risk in mind. Initially, when medical started, it was only the doctor and the nurse. The doctor told the nurse what to do, and the nurse does everything. Then come the manifestation of medical devices. Well, once medical devices came into the field, we needed technologists to run the medical devices to analyze the patient. So we have doctors, nurses, and technologists. But the medical devices were complicated and hard to keep running. So clinical engineering field was formed to assist the staff in keeping the medical devices running and properly functioning. Once that occurred, the data needed to get to one point to another. Hence, the network came into effect. Once the network came into effect, then the doctors and the nurses had technologists and clinical engineering staff to fix the equipment and IT to transfer the data from one point to another. But it didn't take long to know that there is problems sending data from one point to another. Nefarious actors wish to intercept the data, to use it for monetary means or just for pure mischief, and they would do things to harm the patient, so the device has to be protected. That was the one field that our field has failed to comply with, is creating medical device security people to assist us in utilizing their skills to protect the medical devices and the EPHI that is housed on them. At CommonSpirit Health, we have building a medical device security program for one of the largest healthcare industries in the nation, and it's going to take collaboration between clinical engineering and IT to master this great task at hand.
Thank you, Derek. So today in the webinar, we will discuss about the main pillars in order to be able to do automation for the life cycle of the devices. The first pillar is live and accurate inventory. On top of that, being able to give a concise risk assessment and detection, but also to be able to mitigate the relevant risk for medical devices. Having the ability to track on how we are doing with compliance, what are the gaps that we need to close, and how we are tracking that. And also about, now that we are storing all of this data and we have a big data of how the devices are communicating, where they are located, how they're communicating, we can also take some smart decisions based on analytics on how to utilize our devices in a better manner. And we will discuss now in more in depth on each one of these pillars. The first pillar that we are going to speak about is the inventory itself. Derek, it would be interesting to hear from you the key challenges on how you are dealing with maintaining inventory of, I think, more than 1 million devices, medical devices.
Thank you, Ido. Medical devices asset management falls in the lap of clinical engineering. Clinical engineering has tools, and in the case of my great organization, CommonSpirit Health, a database called Team Total Equipment Asset Management that manages and tracks the medical devices by our policies and procedures. But the data from IT and the data from CE doesn't always join in the same funnel. These are two different tribes. They commonly don't work together, but with the security of the medical devices, it is now necessary for these two tribes to get together and put their heads together to assure that the medical devices are safe. There's only one problem. IT does not understand CE. CE does not understand IT. So unless we have, I didn't know my new label was a unicorn, but that's what everyone calls me because I have years and years of experience and a degree in clinical engineering, and I also have a bachelor's in IT. So it behooves staff members like myself to train medical staff people to assist us in our organizations, wherever they are, to protect our medical devices. But the first component of protecting a medical device is understanding the asset. And as a certified biomed, I can tell you, no one understands the asset better than biomedical engineering. They are great about keeping their machines up, getting the preventive maintenance done, coming running when the machines malfunction to assist the staff in getting the data collected and the best treatment for the patient. But we have serious holes in our anticipation of getting the data from the treatment device to the medical record. And that hole is nefarious actors wanting to get our data and utilize it for their own means. There are other issues that Biomed could use an IMT tool for. It is asset management. How many pumps do we have? Where are they? Can I PM the device now? There are so many questions that clinical engineering has regarding medical device allocation that an IOMT tool will surely assist us in getting the right data so we can maximize our FTE hours as we take care of medical devices.
Thank you, Derek. So when we say live inventory of the connected device, let's see how it works, okay? So for example, we have a patient that takes an X-ray scan. The scan is being taken by an acquisition station, and then the data is being sent to a PAC server for digital storage. There is some diagnose workstation that is taking the data and sometimes even send the scan to a CD writer or to a hard copy printed. Another thing that happens is a lot of communication between the PAC server and the HIS, the hospital information system, the RIS, the radiology information system, and the EMR. And all of that in order to be able to do in an efficient manner the patient scheduling, resource management, examination performance tracking, reporting, billing, and more. And of course, this is only an example of one ecosystem that happens right now in connected environments at hospitals. And more than that, of course, that we have a lot of other imaging devices, but not only imaging devices. We have, for example, patient monitors that are communicating to a nurse stations. And this nurse station are communicating to integration servers before they're sending the data many times to the EMR. We have a very large variety of different devices that are communicating into different integration servers. We have tons of wireless devices like infusion pumps, and we see an exponential growth in the amount of connected Internet of Medical devices, for example, wearables such as infants' RFID tags. And this is exactly what we're trying to do at CyberMDX, is bring the ability to taking all of this chaos or challenge and to make it something that the Biomed, the IT, and the information security people will have one place, a single source of truth in order to understand what is happening. By the way, and according to our data, on average, a hospital has between 13 to 15 IOMT devices per bed. So you can imagine the numbers that you have right now in your environment. So the first thing that we would like to discuss is that the live inventory is the first step, the ability to do automatic identification and classification. There is a very large and wide coverage that our solution tries to bring to our customers. We are trying to bring very high granular classification that will include not only the type and the vendor, but also the exact model, the application version, the serial number, etc. We're also trying to bring the clinical network context. It's not only enough to understand that you have a device, but also what is the inbound traffic, the outbound traffic, how does this device, the knowledge and the communication is transferring into the device and outside of the device. Where is the EPHI? Is the EPHI transmitting from this device? Does this device store EPHI? And of course, that we are also trying to give a very deep visibility on unique use cases. Derek, it would be interesting to hear from you, from your perspective, what is deep visibility that is needed for Biomed personnel?
Well, as a certified Biomed, I would assuredly think that visibility of devices to sit on connectivity engines and RS-232 devices are critical to explore your medical device and the medical device environment. How many laboratory information systems have a multitude of connectivity switches or RS-232 devices that plug into our network behind RS-232 devices? It is critical that we get the network data from the devices on the other side of connectivity engines and analyze how those devices are secure on our network also. IOMT tools are critical in looking through devices and assisting the biomeds to know what the state of their devices are. And also, IOMT tools are critical in getting our network data into our databases so that we can have accurate asset management and connectivity of our assets.
Thank you, Derek. So in this, I will show a few principles from our solution. So one of the things that we are trying to do is to bring this type of visibility. One option is to see the different groups of devices. So for example, X-ray devices of Siemens from one type will be in a different group than the other. Of course, that you can, in our solution, search for each one of the devices, sort by different options. And I think that the most interesting part here is that on average, hospitals have more than 150 device families per site, which is a very large amount of different types of devices. And honestly, I mean, the ability to track and to understand exactly what you have in every single moment and to do it manually, it's not something that is realistic. Another point of view that we would like to present is the ability to see like a flat table on each one of the connected devices that you have, which one has PHI, the device connectivity status, that the device right now is connected to the network and is working or it's disconnected. Also to being able to do a CMMS enrichment. So for example, if you already have in your CMMS an owner of a device, so we would like to integrate with your CMMS and enrich our data on the one hand, on the other hand, to enrich your CMMS with data that many times you don't have in your CMMS. For example, the MAC address of each one of the devices. So another point of view, so if a user wants to go and focus more in depth about specific device, you can see here on the right the depth of granularity that we are trying to provide, which is the model, the owner, the application version, and the location of the device, and a lot of other attributes that are really relevant. And I think this is a nice a way to look at things. For example, that the amount of time that nurses spend per shift for looking for an equipment. And this is an example of a use case of how with automatic tools that being able to track all the time where is my devices and what are the status can be helpful for different personnel inside your organization. So a little bit technical slide on how we are doing it. So at CyberMDX, we are agentless and passive solution. We're duplicating the traffic from your network. And once we are doing that, we have the capability of seeing all the traffic, for example, from the city or an infusion pump, and see the medical protocols that goes from the medical devices themselves towards the data center to enrich the medical applications that you have, if it's the EMR, PACS, and etc. Once we have this traffic that feeds our appliance, we are doing three different things that works with a synergy with one and another. The first thing is deep packet inspection. We are parsing over 100 medical protocols in order to being able to give you high granularity of make, model, serial number, etc. Basically, what we are doing is a reverse engineering of all of the medical protocols that are out there. The second step that we are doing is using artificial intelligence with unique, a very strong engine that includes different methods such as natural language processing and unsupervised learning in order to being able to find similarities between devices, families, and subfamilies of devices. And this AI engine allows us to accelerate the process of quickly being able to assess, to find and to be able to identify a medical device, but also to build the baseline of the traffic of devices and being able to find anomalies or deviation from baseline in the way that they are communicating. The third piece that we are also putting in the table is a very rich and a lot of different integrations that we can propose if it comes to the EMR or the CMMS, or with cybersecurity solutions or IT applications that are already deployed in your organization. And basically what we're trying to do is that if you already have some knowledge about your devices in your CMMS, for example, or you have location tracking of like RTLS. So we would like to leverage this data and to correlate with the data that we have in order that you will have the most up-to-date, the most relevant data that right now is many times distributed between different solutions. Okay, the second thing that we would like to discuss, the second pillar of automation for device lifecycle management is the ability to do risk assessment management and response for our medical devices. Derek, this is a place of expertise for you. I will be very interested to hear from you. How do you do it right now in CommonSpirit, in the sense that how to evaluate risk for medical devices? And it will be very interesting to hear it from you.
Thank you, Ido. At CommonSpirit Health, which is one of the largest healthcare industries in the country and a wonderful place to work at, we want to evaluate the risk of our medical devices before they get implemented on our network. So we have a process of when a purchase is being made, that a medical device, a risk assessment is done on it. But a medical device risk assessment doesn't just incorporate when we buy it. We need to evaluate the risk of the medical device through its life cycle in our organization. We really want to know how safe our EPHI and how protected is our network with a medical device connected on our network. So we do a full-blown risk assessment utilizing the MDS2 to tell us, give us insight on things like malware, personnel logging in and out of our equipment, audit logs, remote access, and other aspects of the medical device which allow it to be secure and housed on our network. One of the more tougher issues for clinical engineering, and being a certified biomed on life in clinical engineering, is it is so difficult to patch medical devices that are never turned off. They either monitor patients 24/7 or they have to be up 24/7. So how do you know what your patch level is, and how do you know how difficult it is going to be to patch, and when can I patch it, and for it not to interrupt patient care? This is a juggling act that Biomed must accomplish to protect our network.
Thank you, Derek. So when it comes to risk assessment for medical devices, we suggest to look in a broader manner and really being able to do a deep risk assessment. We should take into consideration different parameters. The first one is, and the most obvious one, is the CVSS score, the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, which is an industry standard for computer system security vulnerabilities. There is a matrix that gives a score range from 0 to 10, with 10 being the most severe. So this is a very good tool in order to understand the relevant vulnerabilities for medical devices and how those vulnerabilities, from 0 to 10, what is the risk that this device exposed to different vulnerabilities. But when it comes to medical devices, we do think that CVSS score is not enough. And we will illustrate it here in an example that we'll take, for example, the Urgent 11 vulnerabilities. This is a series of 11 vulnerabilities that was disclosed a few months ago. And there is a very large variety of devices that are exposed to these vulnerabilities. Basically, all of the devices that are running a specific operating system, a real-time operating system, it's called VxWorks. And there is a large variety of devices from printers and also PC units for infusion pumps. And then comes the question of how we are doing our risk assessment. Does it really relevant only to look on the CVSS score and while we are building our remediation plan, or we should take into consideration the patient safety, the operational and business impact, healthcare risk relevance. One of the things that we're trying to do in CyberMDX, once we are calculating the risk, is also to see how much this risk, this vulnerability is relevant for the healthcare. There is a very large variety of different vulnerabilities that the CVSS score can be the same, but of course, that vulnerability, like the relevant for attacks like the WannaCry, should be handled much quicker than others that we don't see a lot of attacking groups that are exploiting these vulnerabilities. Derek, it will be interesting to hear from your perspective about how really you are doing the risk assessment for the medical devices that comes to your hand.
Yeah, CommonSpirit Health, we have the same issues that other industries have, how to protect our endpoints and our exposed endpoints, how we're going to go about patching them, and these devices are not made the same. One of the main pitfalls of being in medical device security is that clinical engineering and IT have two different endpoints. The endpoint for information technology is the IP address in which from the desk of the data center looks like a computer. But for clinical engineering staff members, the endpoint is the patient. So until IT understands the endpoint of the patient, until CE understands the intel of the IP address, we cannot get on the same page to protect the medical devices. All medical devices are not created equally. There is inherent clinical risk to medical devices to the patient, which is the true endpoint. So that patching and servicing devices, you have to ascertain the patient use and how much clinical risk is to the patient to patch the device. It is a clinical risk to the patient to be on an unprotected device, but one must ensure that the patient is not harmed when trying to patch systems and utilize security measures and to evaluate and mitigate risk.
Mm-hmm. I think that an interesting use case, Derek, that we just discussed before is how to do a risk assessment for a glucometer. If you can elaborate, for example, in this use case of why it's different from traditional IT devices.
Thank you, Ido. In the case of glucometers, there's multiple ways the glucometer can be hooked to get the blood sugar readings from. One, the old method of dropping the glucometer in the cradle and that cradle transfer the data to the server or switch is one way. The second way that a glucometer can transfer the data is to simply have it on Wi-Fi, which is a more of an inherent risk to get the device infected by nefarious actors trying to access the data or harm our patients. The third and most risky methodology is to utilize a USB cable to plug a glucometer into the computer. So you're not only having to defend the glucometer, give it security protection, you also have to protect a medical device that's hooked to a regular computer. If a staff computer can go out to the internet and download things, and we utilize our glucometers to plug in to download this information, it causes a spot where there needs to be great needed concern on how do we protect that device. So either we need to restrict the computer from going onto the computer and the glucometer going to the network, or we're going to let it be vulnerable. So you not only have to assess the glucometer, you have to assess the software on the computer that you have the interface with to ensure that the glucometer is not infected or get any data corrupted in any way, shape, or form, and protect the patient's data at all costs.
Thank you, Derek. One of the things that we are suggesting in the way that you really to be able to give a good risk assessment is, and what we're trying to do at CyberMDX is to maintain a very big databases of all of the relevant vulnerabilities and weaknesses that is related to medical devices. And we're taking our knowledge from product manuals, vendor advisories, internal research team that tries every day to find new vulnerabilities and new ways to check the security of connected medical devices in the environment of our customers. And this is in the end our way to check that our solution will be able to identify and detect immediately a new and unknown threat, because as we are all familiar, the cyber world is something that is evolving, it's changing all the time. And the way to evaluate a solution is to check it in front of new threats or unknown threats and not something that happened in the past. Because hackers today have a very strong capabilities in a sense of polymorphism in the way that they can impersonate, and the traffic over the network will look like traditional or legitimate traffic. And we're also taking data from MDS2 and other traditional knowledge base such the ICS-30. Once we have all of that, we're trying to bring a dynamic and fact-driven risk model that takes into the consideration of the significance of each one of the risks, but also the likelihood, in order to, in the end, to really find the thing that should be handled as quick as possible. So once again, I would go to the example of how things look in our UI. So I'm coming back to this. If you want to see a specific device, so you can see in our solution all of the inbound traffic, all of the open ports, all of the services that are open on the medical device, the outgoing traffic. We're also trying to give a very concise risk assessment for all of the relevant vulnerabilities. Another thing that we're doing is automatic matching for MDS2 to each one of the devices. Derek, it will be interesting for me to hear from you. Why do you think this is an interesting use case for Biomed personnel?
Yeah, the MDS2 is critical in evaluating the medical device, but we don't live in glass boxes. All MDS2s aren't created equal. Some organizations give great detail on their medical devices and want you to understand how it could be secured on the network. Other organizations have narrowed it down to yes and no. So we have to think outside the box. So at CommonSpirit Health, my beloved organization, we have created additional security questions to fill in the holes that MDS2 sometimes lack. Now, not all companies have simplistic MDS2s, but many do. So we have created an additional security questionnaire to fill in the blanks and the holes in the MDS2 where we want to acquire more security data about a medical device.
Mm-hmm. On top of that, we're also trying to give more operational profile and risk that is related to the device, if it's FDA recall, because once we have automatic identification of the model of the device, the serial number, we can automatically get data from the FDA about new recalls and to associate each one of the recalls to relevant devices. Another and very important piece is the ability to identify threats. So in this example, you can see this red arrow, and this arrow is in red, and we see a high risk new threat. And this is because our AI engine was able to detect a deviation from baseline of how this device is usually the traffic of this device. So the baseline is that you have, for example, an IT computer that is managed this device, or you have the vendor that is also manage the device. But there is no reasonable reason for an NSPC to try to manage the device through a telnet protocol. And this is one of the things that we are trying to do, leveraging the fact that we collect all the data and also using machine learning and artificial intelligence baselining in order to detect things like that as soon as possible. Again, according to our statistics, 15% of hospital devices are regularly accessed via unencrypted management protocols such as FTP, Telnet. So it's make it even more difficult, and this is why you need a very good AI capability in order to really pinpoint the events that are really malicious or anomalies and differentiate them from the day-to-day work of how hospital network is communicating. and working the day-to-day. I will give here a use case of Hospira infusion pump of how a deep risk assessment can be helpful and significant. So in this case, we can see a vulnerability that was published by CISA, and those vulnerabilities are taking into consideration two different parameters. The first one is the exact model of the device, if it's Plum A or Plum A+3, but also the exact application version that this device has on this device. So one of the things that we're trying to give to our users is the ability to really get only the relevant alerts for their devices. So we have seen cases of places with tens of thousands of connected Hospira infusion pumps on different hospitals, but only a few dozens, a few hundreds of them are really vulnerable to these vulnerabilities. So we are trying to getting very deep on each one of the devices from the firmware version itself in order to be able to send alerts about devices that is really relevant only for the devices that are really vulnerable for these vulnerabilities. So now comes the question, okay, so we have a big challenge. What are the toolbox that we have what are the tools that we have in our toolbox? So in order to be able to build a priority plan to mitigate and manage the risk, there is 4 things that we can suggest. The first one, and in most cases it's the easiest one, is to do configuration change. In this example, we have the GE Healthcare CareScape monitor. These devices have a management portal on port 10,000, and many times these devices come with default credentials. So a low-hanging fruit can be just changing these credentials and reducing dramatically the risk that is associated with this device. The second tool that we have, is being able to do a software patch. As Derek mentioned before, it's not an easy task for medical devices. It's much easier for doing it for Windows machines or to my iPhone. And also here we have a process at CyberMDX from give the exact device status patch level to help you to understand what is the best time to patch until doing, in the end, a patch verification and being able to get a report. So let's say that you have 200 infusion pumps of Hospira that you need to patch, and where are you on this remediation? How many devices already being patched? How many of them are still waiting for that? Where this device is located? How do you utilizing them, etc. The third thing that we are able to provide is to put and install endpoint protection. So, of course, that not a lot of medical devices is something that you can do, but some of them, and you can learn this data from the MDX2 forms, are willing and provide giving you the knowledge that you can install anti-malware protection on the device. And this is, of course, something that's very interesting. If you will be able to automatically tag all of the medical devices, you can at least put some endpoint protection. And the last piece that we are trying to help, and this thing that we are doing with the IT and the information security team, is to improve your segmentation in your network and being able to, in the end, really reducing the attack surface by providing and only legitimate traffic to being able to transmit it over the network. So in this example, an imaging device should be able to communicate with a DICOM protocol with the PAC server, but there is no reason that an IP camera will be able to communicate with an imaging device. But still, I know there is no such thing as 100% security, and it's always very important to understand that risk management is a game of numbers and statistics, but in the end, you can't be protected in 100%. And this is why one of the things that is important for us once we are doing the deployment of our solution is not only being able to detect an attack, if it's malicious, a known attack, or anomaly detection and unknown attack. It's always being able to building the processes and the workflows with your organization to make sure the incident response team is familiar with our alerts and build a process on how to being able to, as quick as possible, to understand the severity of this event, the scope, the context, if the impact is minor or wide, and if needed, what is our response. We can suggest, for example, to integrate with your network access control, and if you have some imaging device, CT, that was being exploited and runs a malware, so you can, for example, automatically sanction this device in order for this malware not and block the ability of this malware to being to exploit other devices and to do lateral movement in your organization. The next thing that we would like to discuss is about compliance. Derek, it will be very interesting to hear from you. How do you see compliance? I think that I think there is a pretty good example here in this case of this X-ray machine from 1914. That this Dr. Maxime Menred from the radiology department at Cochin Hospital in Paris, he was a researcher and used a lot of different X-rays, but in the end, this doctor lost his finger to because side effects from operating the X-ray machine. So, of course, that the compliance that was evaluated and developed over the years is very related to patient safety, and so that this is something that we would like to be able to track in an effective manner. Derek?
Yeah, there are so many challenges in evaluating compliance of our organization's policies and protocols. Medical devices create a unique issue when trying to check for compliance, because to talk to the asset, you must understand the asset. And with systems being embedded, and most medical device systems having applications on top of the OS, it is difficult for a layman especially, and sometimes even difficult for clinical engineering staff to walk up to the device and ask it, what is it complying with? Does it have a password? Is this log being kept? But one device that can be utilized to assist clinical engineering staff and IT staff is to use IOMT tools. This produces a wealth of data that CE desperately needs and IT desperately needs. But these two tribes are so far apart sometimes that either one department has the IOMT tool and the other department doesn't utilize it, and they won't get on the same page about their data. But one thing we all must remember while doing medical device security is that main moniker. Reach one, teach one. We need to teach each other medical device security in partnership so that the IT and CE staff can grow together as security professionals and assist each other in protecting the organization's medical devices and the network where they reside on.
Thank you, Derek. So one of the things that we like to provide to the user in our solution is the ability to have and to configure which type of report they would like and what is the things that are in their interest. So, for example, what are all of the medical devices that I have with outdated software version? What is the status of my open FDA recalls with according to different departments? Another thing that we see very interesting, what is the status of my connected devices? How many connected devices do I have? How my network is evolving in the sense of how many devices have an endpoint protection, how many devices are at high risk? How do I'm using and utilizing the data that I have from the different alerts that I have? How many new alerts does the system provided, issued? How many tickets did I open? And how many of the issues I was able to resolve? And in the end, the goal is being able to give some score in order to understand exactly where we are standing when it comes to compliance. The last challenge that we would like to cover now is now that we have all of this data, We know how devices are communicating, in which hours, what is the amount of traffic that is being transmitted. So now we can get some very interesting and smart insights about our devices. For example, do we have enough infusion pumps? Do we really need to buy new patient monitors? Maybe we can take a few of our devices and use them in another hospital, because we are utilizing our patient monitors only 20% of the time. We can use this data in order to be able to decide in a smarter manner when do we want to patch a device. And on the other hand, maybe we are overutilizing some of our devices. As Derek mentioned before, an example of devices that are utilizing 24/7, and maybe these devices, we can see in advance that are starting to malfunction, or maybe we need to check those devices in more occasionally in order to be sure that these devices we are not overutilizing. So in this example, in our solution, we will take an ultrasound of Philips. You can see the total amount of devices that you have in your organization. What is the weekly peak usage, for example, on each hour of the day during a week, and we can take statistics 1 and 2 years back. How much did you utilizing during a specific time? And in this example, of course, for example, for an ultrasound, because it's a DICOM protocol, we can get, and thanks to the fact that we are doing the deep packet inspection, we can give you much more in-depth data about the series of images, different studies, and relate them to specific patients if needed. We can also do it for other devices, for example, infusion pumps. Does the device is right now disconnected, connected to the network, or really delivering fluids, and even the flow rate of the specific infusion pump? So it really depends on the use case and the interest of the user. But in the end, this is the depth and the granularity that we are trying to provide. By the way, on an average utilization according to our statistics, all of the connected medical devices is 42%. And again, I mean, this is a question that needs to be asked. I mean, what is the gold number that we want? Maybe 42 is good, maybe 42 is bad. But at least, I mean, now that we have the data, we can ask smarter questions. So for example, we can see how infusion pumps of BD are distributed between different facilities or different segments in the network. So for example, in this case, we can see that there are a lot of devices that are, total devices that are from one place is not close to the peak of usage of devices in one site. So we can consider maybe moving some of the devices to other sites that are the devices are utilizing in a much stronger manner. Another example that we can, using those heat maps, is, for example, to see that we should patch this if we are deciding that we need to patch this X-ray machine. So the preferred time to do it is between Monday and Thursday, between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. This is the hours that the device is hardly being utilized. To sum up, in order to provide lifecycle automation of devices, we're trying to collect all of the traffic that goes through your network. If it's a medical device, IOMT, IoT devices, endpoints, we are providing 100% visibility to all of your devices. Based on that, give you a live and accurate inventory, being able to detect all of the risk that you have and suggest to your mitigation, track on the compliance, and provide utilization optimization insights. Let's look a little bit into the future, and we will go to our last slide. So it's really hard to imagine what the future will look like, but we do know to say that, and we already see it, that a lot of traffic, a lot of data is going into the cloud, where we have infinite place for big data storage. We have a very strong artificial intelligence capabilities of companies like Google and Facebook and Microsoft, and we will be able to collect in much better way all of the different data that we are collecting, if from distributed hospitals and clinics, wearable devices like Apple watches, implemented medical devices like pacemakers, and hospitals. So, Derek, it will be interesting to hear from you, your perspective, because when we spoke before, you tell me the future is here, the future is now in CommonSpirit. I would be happy to hear from you. How do you see the future?
The future in our profession of healthcare data management and clinical engineering is going to be a lot worse before it's ever AI makes it better. The data transfer of our systems are going to be like network data on steroids. The only safe haven we have is to collaborate with the other tribes. As I've said before, reach one, teach one. CE should reach an IT person and teach him the importance of the endpoint of the patient. Reach one, teach one. IT needs to reach out to clinical engineering and teach them the topology of the network in which the data is housed. This will enable us to train each other to be medical device security staff. The one field that we do not have proper coverage is medical device security. IT must understand the clinical risk to the patient. CE must understand the vulnerability to the network. So if we follow along the lines of reaching one and teaching one, we will be successful. And that is what I hope that organizations move to collaborate with the two IT tribes and CE tribes to create medical device security that could propel us into the future.
Thank you, Derek. So if you have any more questions, we'd like to assist you. And now we have a few minutes for questions and answers. And if you have more questions, you're more than welcome to contact me directly or to Derek. You can see our emails over here.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Yes, we have got a few questions. The first one is one of our attendees is saying thank you to you both. Do you have any recommendations on how other HTMs can bridge the gap between biomed and cybersecurity?
I would think the initial breaking point to breach the gap is to define a risk assessment process that both clinical engineering and IT understand. If they use the basic risk assessment to evaluate their risk as a building block, they will be able to quickly build their processes and programs around that risk assessment document. And with dealing with medical devices, they must remember everything must be written down, everything must be documented, everybody needs to be on the same song sheet so there's not clinical risk to the patient.
Okay, that's great. How can an organization estimate the workload for staff dedicated to cybersecurity?
That's a very difficult question. My beloved organization has a problem with that also. But with the onset of IOMT tools, this is a formidable task if you're going to do it with pure FTE hours alone. But with the IOMT tools that are now available from manufacturers, we'll be able to utilize how many pieces we got and will assist us in ascertaining what FTEs are needed to protect our network by displaying what is on our network and how vulnerable is it.
Okay, and I've got another question here. Is our organization is at the beginning of our cybersecurity vulnerability program. How deep should we be scanning medical devices?
Medical device scanning is a precarious business. The best way to address that is develop a scanning list. All medical devices aren't alike. There is a big difference of a patient not being able to get an extra L2 reading than you're tipping over a cath lab in the middle of a procedure. So it is best to inquire to the OEM, can their device be scanned? We have our medical questionnaire ask that question and compile a no scan list of those devices. And they can be scanned, but under a managed condition.
Okay, and Derek, I've actually got another question for you. Can you describe what other departments you work with on your cybersecurity strategy?
The other departments I work, enterprise information security, governance, risk, and compliance, and clinical engineering. Those are the three cogs of the departments I work for. I spent a lifetime in clinical engineering, understanding medical devices from nurse call systems to CTs. And I work for governance, risk, and compliance, and enterprise information security. So all three of these are important cogs in making a functioning medical device security department.
Okay, and another one for you. Can you talk a little bit about what integrations your organization has with its asset discovery and cybersecurity solution?
Well, our asset, like most organizations, the onset of IOMT tools is a new thing. So our discovery mechanism we use now is a manual discovery mechanism where a clinical engineering database houses. Clinical engineering is ultimately responsible for the medical devices. And I'm a certified biomed, you can't have it any other way. But this data is being put in to the databases of our organizations. The issue is that in the old days, security was not a functionality of biomed. It was not a functionality of steady state. So one must incorporate security in the steady state process. This is just difficult because of austerity reasons and FTEs for a biomed to have this additional workload thrust upon him. So that's why it's critical that we start training and implementing medical device security staff personnel to assist the biomeds in the steady state security process.
That's great. Thank you so much, Derek. We're actually coming up to dead on our hour now. So thank you both, Ido and Derek, for a really great and informative webinar. And thank you again to today's sponsor, CyberMDX. Just a quick reminder that the post-webinar survey and certificate process is automated. So the survey link will be included in the follow-up email, which you'll receive in about an hour's time. Once you've completed the survey, you'll be able to download your certificate immediately. If you have any questions, please contact us at webinar@mdpublishing.com. And for more information about our upcoming webinars, please visit our website, webinarwednesday.live. So thank you once again for attending today. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we hope to see you next week.